In the last episode, we talked about settings in your camera to use to expose your image. Today we're going to talk about something just as important, lenses. Let's dive into the basics of camera lenses to help you use them on set and to figure out which ones to buy or rent when it's time to shoot your movie. When it comes to picking a lens to set up your shot, there are two main things to consider when choosing a lens: focal length and aperture. Let's start with your focal length. The technical definition is the distance between the optical center and the imaging plane when the lens is focused at infinity. But for all you laymen out there, it's how zoomed in your image is. The longer the focal length, the more zoomed in you are. You can find the focal length of your lens by looking at the lens body for this measurement in millimeters. Some people have gotten it confused with the measurement on the lens face, filter, or lens cap. That's not the focal length, that's the diameter of the lens face. And that's important for buying the right lens caps, filters, or other accessories, but that's not the focal length. Back to focal length, the shorter the focal length, the wider your shot will be. The longer the focal length, the more zoomed in your shot will be. In a spectrum between wide and what we call telephoto, which is a fancy film word for zoomed in. Generally, anything 35 millimeters or shorter is considered wide. Images with wide focal lengths are very zoomed out, which can help you see big things or be closer to something when you're shooting it, but it can also distort your image. You know when something gets closer, it looks bigger? That size effect is very apparent on a wide lens. That's why if you take a photo of a person from close up with a wide lens, their nose is going to look bigger than their ears, their face is going to look like it's bulging. The lens is exaggerating the distance between close and far away. On the other end of the spectrum are telephoto lenses, generally anything longer than 65 millimeters, and they give you a very zoomed in image. This leads to a compressed image, which means the distance between things close to the camera and things far away are less apparent in your image. In this shot from The Graduate, Dustin Hoffman is running towards the camera, but because it's shot on such a telephoto lens, it doesn't look like he's getting all that closer. Whereas in this shot from Cars, because they use virtual cameras in animation films, the lens choice here is wider in order to give us that distance distortion of cars zooming past the camera, quickly going from big to small in our image. A drawback to telephoto lenses is that because they're so long, they can also limit how much light gets through your lens. This is like looking through a long tube. Less light entering the opening can make it all the way through compared to a short tube. And so because of that, when you're shooting telephoto, you might be limited on how wide of an aperture you can use. Maybe as closed down as f6 or f5.6, when you might really want at least f4. In between telephoto and wide lenses are lenses we would consider medium lenses. They give us a natural look, something similar to how your eyes see objects. The second facet to talk about is the aperture. Remember, the aperture is the controllable hole in your lens that lets light pass through. We talked more in depth about aperture in our 5 elements of exposure video, so please check that out if you haven't already. Really high-end lenses will allow you to open up that aperture and really get more light into your camera. Why that's important for when you're selecting a lens to shoot with is that a lens with a wide aperture can really maximize the flexibility of shooting at night because you can get so much more light through the lens. Now, yes, this comes with the issue of a thinner depth of field, but that's normally a trade-off I take if I know I'm shooting a lot at night or in the dark. Few things suck worse when you're trying to keep a shoot going, but it gets too dark and you have to crank up your ISO because your lens can't open up its aperture anymore. Now that you understand focal length and aperture, let's talk about some of the different kinds of lenses you can pick and how that affects your focal length, aperture, and of course, your image. The first lens distinction to know about is between a zoom lens or a prime lens. A zoom lens is exactly how it sounds. It lets you zoom in and out. We call this a variable focal length. A prime lens is one that's fixed at a specific focal length. You might think, why not just get a zoom lens so then I can have total flexibility on set? That's a good idea for documentaries and live events where you don't want to be fumbling around with lenses. But keep in mind that a zoom lens has to fit a bunch more glass and gears and mechanisms for zooming in and out, which can lower the quality of your image as well as limit how wide of an aperture your lens can open up to. A prime lens, on the other hand, is generally going to have better image quality and a wider aperture. But yeah, you won't be able to change the focal length. To demonstrate this, here at NODEHAUS, we have a really nice L-series 24 to 105 millimeter lens. Very high quality, great for documentaries, but it can only open up to f4 aperture. Meanwhile, on our Rokinon Cine Prime lenses, they can open up to f1.4, which is 4 times as bright. Another distinction you'll want to be aware of is the difference between cinema lenses and photography lenses. In terms of your image, there's not really a difference, but as their name suggests, the construction of the lenses are geared for their use in filmmaking or photography. The main difference is in how easy it is to pull focus on your lens. In cinema lenses, the focus ring has teeth to interact with the follow focus, and it also takes a lot more turning to pull focus, allowing you to get more accurate in your focus while filming. The opposite is true for photography lenses. The focus ring does not have gear teeth, and you can only turn your focus ring a little bit before it hits the ends. This is because photographers need to be able to hit their focus faster with their hands, if they're not already using the autofocus features in their camera. Cinema lenses also allow you to control the aperture manually, whereas modern photography lenses require you to control it electronically through your camera. Even older photography lenses that do allow you to change the aperture manually normally click between the different apertures. Cinema lenses are de-clicked, so you can smoothly change the aperture even in the middle of your shot. And just a quick tip, focus pulling is a very precise and difficult job, so make sure you're practicing this before you start shooting to get the best focus possible. Some other features you should be aware of when you're picking a lens would be how close it can pull focus to. Some lenses can't pull focus closer than a few feet away, but some specialize in close-up focus. Those are called macro lenses. Another feature to know about is how good its internal stabilization is. Newer lenses today are just way better at stabilization than older lenses. And the last feature of a lens I'll mention is arguably one of the most important features because it can make the lens totally unusable to your camera if you're not aware of it. And that is the lens mount system that your camera has and the type of lens that works with it. Every lens is built for a specific camera type because the focal length of the lens only works if the manufacturer knows how deep inside the camera the sensor is. On top of that, lens and camera manufacturers have built electronic functionalities in their lenses that require power from the camera, things like the autofocus or the stabilization. And so buying a lens that can actually work with your camera is very important. Otherwise, your lens might not work properly, if at all. We shoot with a lot of Canon cameras here at NODEHAUS, so we use lenses with a Canon EF mount. Sony and other camera manufacturers have their own mount systems, so be sure to check out which system works best for you. All of these considerations are incredibly important when choosing a lens to best capture your ideal shots for your movie. Remember that lenses are super expensive, almost more so than your camera, so remember to treat them with the utmost care. I don't want to see any lenses lying around on the floor. Make sure that when a lens is not in use, it's placed back in your camera bag or your lens case. It may also be beneficial to purchase a UV filter to protect the glass in your lens from ultraviolet rays. Lenses are the greater half of your camera, so treat them nice and research them heavily before buying. After all, you don't want to stick with the garbage default Canon zoom lens forever. Thanks for watching this episode of NODEHAUS Film School. If you want downloadable resources, be sure to check out our Gumroad. If you want to join the conversation, join our Discord. And if you want more videos like this, always be sure to subscribe for more and hit the bell.